My son Ethan is 18 years old. In 2 weeks, he graduates from high school. Yesterday, we received a call from Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. There was a mistake 18 years ago. A terrible, life-altering mistake. The baby we took home wasn't ours. Somewhere in New York, another family raised our biological son. And the boy I've loved for 18 years, the boy I call my son, belongs to them. Now both families must decide. Do we keep the children we raised, or reclaim the ones we gave birth to? Please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. What you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about family. I've always thought of myself as Rebecca Miller, 45 years old, marketing executive at a midtown firm, and most importantly, mother to Ethan. My husband David and I live in a comfortable apartment in the Upper West Side. Not the glitzy penthouses of the super rich, but a decent 3-bedroom with a view of the park if you lean out the window just right. We're comfortable, worked our way up to it. David's an architect who specializes in sustainable urban design, and between our salaries, we've built a solid life. Ethan has been the center of that life for 18 years. He's brilliant in ways I never was. Quiet, thoughtful, with a mind for mathematics that leaves both David and me scratching our heads. He's been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, something we've been celebrating for weeks. The graduation invitations went out last month. My parents are flying in from Chicago. David's sister is coming with her family from Boston. It was going to be perfect. People occasionally commented that Ethan didn't look much like either of us. David and I are both fair-haired, while Ethan's hair is dark, almost black. David's family has those piercing blue eyes. Mine are hazel, but Ethan's are deep brown. We always laughed it off. He must take after my grandmother, I'd say. Or David would joke, the mailman has some explaining to do. We never truly wondered. Not once, why would we? He was our son. The call came on a Tuesday. I was at work, finalizing a presentation, when my cell phone rang. Mount Sinai Hospital. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a donation request. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Miller, this is Patricia Coleman from Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm calling about a sensitive matter that requires your immediate attention. Could you come to the hospital today? It's regarding your son, Ethan. My heart stopped. Is Ethan okay? Has there been an accident? No, Ethan is fine as far as we know, she said, her voice measured, professional. This concerns his birth. We need to speak with you and your husband in person. It's quite urgent. I called David immediately, and we met at the hospital 2 hours later. They took us to a conference room on the administrative floor, not the usual patient areas. A woman in a suit introduced herself as the hospital's legal counsel. A man beside her was from risk management. A doctor sat at the end of the table looking solemn. My stomach knotted tighter with each introduction. Patricia Coleman, who had called me, was the chief of patient affairs. She spoke slowly, choosing each word with deliberate care. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, our hospital has recently completed an internal investigation into certain practices from 18 years ago. During an audit of our record-keeping systems, we discovered a serious error that occurred on June 12, 2007. David took my hand under the table. His palm was sweaty. That was the day Ethan was born, he said. Patricia nodded, her face grim. Yes, we have reason to believe that on that day, there was an error in the nursery involving infant identification. We've conducted DNA testing based on samples we had on file from Ethan's birth and subsequent visits. I'm deeply sorry to inform you that the DNA results confirm Ethan is not biologically related to either of you. The words hit like physical blows. Not biologically related. Not our son. That's impossible, I said automatically. There's been a mistake in your testing. The doctor slid a folder across the table. We ran the tests multiple times to be absolutely certain. We compared them with samples taken during Ethan's appendectomy when he was 7, and with both of your records from various procedures. The genetic markers show no relation. David's voice was barely audible. If Ethan isn't our biological son, then where is our biological child? And who are Ethan's biological parents? Patricia exchanged glances with the legal counsel before continuing. We've identified the other family involved. Their name is Ramirez. They also live in New York, in Queens. They have a son named Michael, born on the same day as Ethan in the same maternity ward. You've already contacted them? I asked, my mind racing to catch up. Yes, they came in yesterday for testing. The results confirm that Michael is your biological son, and Ethan is theirs. The legal counsel spoke up. The nurse who was primarily responsible for the nursery that night no longer works here. We've tried to piece together exactly how the switch occurred, but it appears the identification tags were mixed up during a shift change. Both babies were similar in weight and appearance as newborns, and the error was never detected. For 18 years, David said, his voice hollow. Our son has been with strangers for 18 years. The hospital officials exchanged uncomfortable glances. How was this discovered now? I asked. After all this time? The doctor cleared his throat. Michael Ramirez recently participated in a genetic study through his high school. The researchers noticed genetic markers that didn't align with his parents. They contacted us as the hospital of birth, and we began investigating. The legal counsel spoke again, her tone shifting to something more formal. Mount Sinai deeply regrets this error. We're prepared to offer comprehensive psychological support for both families, legal consultation, mediation services, and appropriate financial compensation. We understand that no amount of money can adequately address what has happened, but we want to do everything possible to help both families through this impossible situation. I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on one fact. Somewhere in Queens was a boy with my eyes, my smile, my DNA. A stranger I had never met. My son. When can we meet them? I asked, interrupting whatever the lawyer was saying. The Ramirez family. When can we meet our biological son? The drive home was silent. David gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. I stared out the window at the Manhattan streets, at people going about their normal lives, unaware that our world had just imploded. What are we going to tell Ethan? David finally asked as we parked outside our building. I don't know. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. How do you tell your child he's not your child? Ethan got home from school at 4:30. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound of his backpack hitting the floor, his call of Mom? Dad? Why are you both home? He appeared in the doorway of the living room, still in his school clothes, hair messed up from the wind. My son, but not my son. The thought felt like a betrayal. What's wrong? He asked immediately, seeing our faces. Did somebody die? Sit down, Ethan, David said gently. We need to talk to you about something important. Ethan sat, looking between us with growing concern. You're freaking me out. What's going on? I took a deep breath. We got a call from Mount Sinai Hospital today. There was a mistake when you were born, 18 years ago. His forehead creased. What kind of mistake? David and I exchanged glances. How do you say this? There's no manual for this conversation. The hospital believes that you were switched with another baby, given to the wrong parents. Ethan stared at us, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he laughed nervously. Is this some kind of weird joke? I wish it was, I said, my voice breaking. The hospital did DNA tests. They're certain. The color drained from his face. You're not my real parents? We are your real parents, David said firmly. We've raised you for 18 years. We love you. Nothing changes that. But you're not my biological parents, Ethan clarified, his voice rising. Who am I then? Who are my actual parents? Do I have a different name? Different family history? The questions tumbled out faster than we could answer them. Your biological parents are named Elena and Carlos Ramirez, I said. They live in Queens. They've been raising our biological son, Michael. Ethan stood up suddenly. This is insane. You're lying. Why would you say something like this? It's the truth, Ethan. We just found out today. So what happens now? He demanded, pacing the living room. Do you ship me off to Queens? Trade me in for your real kid? No, we both said in unison. You are our real kid, David insisted. Nothing changes how we feel about you. Everything changes, Ethan shouted, tears welling in his eyes. Everything. Do you even still love me knowing I'm not yours? I rose and went to him, pulling him into my arms despite his resistance. Listen to me. You are my son. You have been my son for 18 years. DNA doesn't change that. I love you exactly as you are. He crumpled against me, sobbing like he hadn't since he was small. Who am I, Mom? I don't even know who I am anymore. The hospital arranged a meeting for both families 3 days later. They provided a neutral space in a private conference room, with 2 counselors present to facilitate. David, Ethan, and I arrived first. Ethan had barely spoken in the days since our conversation. He'd skipped school, stayed in his room, and refused most meals. When he did speak, it was just to ask questions neither of us could answer. Do I have siblings? Are they religious? What do they do? Why did this happen? When the door opened and the Ramirez family walked in, time seemed to stop. Elena Ramirez was petite with dark hair and the same deep brown eyes as Ethan. Carlos was tall and broad-shouldered with a serious face. And between them was a boy, our biological son. Michael Ramirez looked so much like David that it took my breath away. The same jawline, the same way of standing. His hair was lighter than the Ramirez's, closer to my shade of dark blonde. He had my eyes, my nose. Looking at him was like seeing an alternate universe version of what Ethan might have been. The counselor spoke first. Thank you all for coming. I know this is an incredibly difficult situation. We're here to facilitate an initial meeting and discussion about how to move forward. There are no right or wrong answers here. Just what works best for your families, and especially for Ethan and Michael. The introduction did little to dispel the overwhelming awkwardness. We sat across from each other, 2 families connected by an unimaginable mistake. I'm Rebecca, I finally said. This is my husband David and our son Ethan. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. I'm Elena. This is Carlos, and our son Michael. Carlos extended his hand to David, who shook it automatically. This is surreal. Yes, David agreed. Completely surreal. The boys stared at each other with undisguised curiosity. I wondered what Ethan saw when he looked at Michael. A rival? An intruder? A mirror of what might have been? You look like my dad, Michael said suddenly to David, breaking the silence. David nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, you have your mother's eyes, though. My eyes. My son's eyes, looking back at me from a stranger's face. The differences between our families became immediately apparent. The Ramirezes lived in a working-class neighborhood in Queens. Carlos was a construction foreman, Elena a nurse at a community clinic. They had 2 younger daughters, both biologically theirs. Michael was headed to Queens College in the fall, planning to study engineering while living at home to save money. Our Upper West Side lifestyle, Ethan's acceptance to MIT, our weekend home in the Hamptons. It all felt suddenly excessive when discussed across the table from the Ramirez family. Did you ever suspect? Elena asked me quietly, while the counselor was speaking to the boys. That he wasn't yours? Never, I admitted. Did you? She shook her head. Michael was always different from our daughters. Quieter, more serious. We thought he took after Carlos's father. We never imagined. She trailed off, looking at Ethan. He has my mother's smile. As the initial shock wore off, difficult questions emerged. What happens next? Do we just go back to our separate lives knowing what we know? Do we try to integrate our families somehow? What about legal considerations? Birth certificates, educational records, medical histories. The hospital lawyers explained that since both boys were now 18, legally adults, many decisions would be up to them. No court would force a switch of custody at this point. But the practical and emotional implications remained complex. There are several ways families in your situation have chosen to handle this, one of the counselors explained. Some opt for a complete exchange, where each child returns to their biological parents. Given the boys' ages, that's less common. Others maintain the status quo legally, but develop relationships between both families. Still others create a blended family approach, with both young men having relationships with both sets of parents. Ethan spoke up for the first time. Don't we get a say in this? It's our lives you're all discussing. Of course you do, the counselor assured him. In fact, your preferences should be the primary consideration. I don't want to leave my parents, Ethan said firmly, glancing at us. I don't care what some DNA test says. They're my mom and dad. The words filled me with relief and guilt simultaneously. Relief that he still wanted us. Guilt that I felt relieved at all. Michael nodded in agreement. I feel the same way. The Ramirezes are my family. I'm sorry if that hurts anyone's feelings, but that's how it is. Carlos put his hand on Michael's shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride and pain. Nobody is suggesting you boys have to leave your homes. But perhaps there's room in your lives for more family? I don't know, Ethan said, looking uncomfortable. This is all too weird. The counselor suggested that we take things slowly, exchange contact information, perhaps allow the boys to meet privately if they wished, and reconvene in a week to discuss further. As we prepared to leave, I found myself standing next to Michael. Up close, the resemblance to my family was even more striking. I'm not trying to replace your mom, I said softly. But if you ever want to talk or have questions or just want to get coffee sometime, I'd like that. He nodded, looking as lost as I felt. Maybe. I don't know yet. Ethan was waiting by the door, watching us with an unreadable expression. My son, not my son, both somehow. The following days brought new complications. Ethan's graduation was now just 10 days away. What had been a straightforward celebration became fraught with questions. Would the Ramirezes come? Should we invite them? What about Michael? Would his presence be comforting or disruptive to Ethan? David and I disagreed about how to proceed. I wanted to get to know Michael, to at least have some relationship with the child I had carried for 9 months, but never raised. David was more hesitant. Ethan needs us right now, he argued. He's struggling. If we start dividing our attention, what message does that send? It's not a zero-sum game, I countered. We can support Ethan and still acknowledge Michael. Can we? Because Ethan doesn't seem to think so. Have you seen how he watches you? He's terrified we're going to replace him. Our argument was interrupted when Ethan came home with Michael in tow. The two had apparently met up on their own initiative. We went for pizza, Ethan announced, as if bringing home his biological replacement was the most natural thing in the world. We figured we should talk, just us. The boys settled in our living room, an identical contrast. Ethan in his dark jeans and band t-shirt, hair falling in his eyes. Michael in neat khakis and a polo shirt, hair cropped short, nature versus nurture, playing out before our eyes. It's weird, Michael said, looking around our apartment. I could have grown up here. And I could have grown up in Queens, Ethan replied. Different schools, different friends, different everything, Michael agreed. Would you have been me? Would I have been you? The question hung in the air, impossible to answer. Would Ethan still be a math prodigy if he'd been raised in the Ramirez home? Would Michael have developed his passion for engineering in our household? How much of who they were came from their genes, and how much from their environments? Have you told your friends? Michael asked Ethan. Ethan shook his head. No way. How do you even start that conversation? Hey, turns out I'm not who I thought I was for 18 years. I told my girlfriend, Michael admitted. She thinks it's like a movie. It's not a movie. It's our lives, Ethan said bitterly. Nobody gets to turn it off when it gets too weird. As the days passed, tensions grew between all parties. The Ramirezes wanted Michael to spend more time with us, to know his heritage, as Elena put it. But Michael seemed reluctant, and Ethan increasingly resentful. They want to trade us, Ethan said one night, after another awkward dinner with both families. They look at me like I'm some kind of imposter. That's not true, I insisted, though I'd seen the way Carlos studied Ethan, looking for glimpses of himself. Yes, it is. And you look at Michael the same way, like you're trying to see what I should have been. His words stung because there was truth in them. I did find myself searching Michael's face, his mannerisms, for reflections of myself. It was instinctual, this pull toward biological connection. The situation was complicated further when a reporter somehow learned of our story. Switched at birth, Manhattan edition, ran as a feature in a local paper, and suddenly we were fielding calls from national media. The privacy we desperately needed to work through this impossible situation was shattered. The pressure intensified as Ethan's graduation approached. What should have been a joyful milestone became a symbolic battleground. Who would attend? Where would everyone sit? Would there be a celebration afterward? And if so, with which family? 5 days before graduation, Ethan disappeared. He didn't come home from school, didn't answer his phone, and wasn't at any of his usual places. By midnight, we were frantic. It was Michael who found him, at 3 a.m, sitting on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "How did you know he'd be here?" I asked when Michael called us. "We talked about it," Michael said simply. "About places where we go to think." "This is his." David and I rushed to the museum. Ethan sat huddled on the steps, looking small and lost. Michael stood a short distance away, giving him space but clearly standing guard. "I can't do it," Ethan said when we approached. "The graduation. Not with everyone watching, waiting to see what the switched babies do, who sits with which family. It's sick." "Then we won't go," David said immediately. "We'll have our own celebration, just us." "That's not fair to you," Ethan argued. "You've been waiting for this day for years." "Nothing about this is fair," I said, sitting beside him. "But we'll get through it together, however you want to handle it." Michael cleared his throat. "Can I say something?" When Ethan nodded, he continued. "What if we did it together? Both families. Not pretending we're one big happy unit, but acknowledging reality. We were switched. It happened. We can't undo it. But we can refuse to let it ruin our graduation." Ethan looked at him thoughtfully. "Why are you being so reasonable about all this?" Michael shrugged. "One of us has to be." For the first time in days, Ethan smiled slightly. "I'm going to MIT, and you're going to Queen's College. That should have been reversed too, you know. You're the engineering guy. And you're the pure math genius," Michael agreed. "Life's weird that way." On graduation day, we arrived as planned. 2 separate families who shared an inexplicable bond. The Ramirezes sat beside us, uncomfortable but determined. Michael's sisters, 9 and 11, whispered and giggled, oblivious to the tension. When Ethan crossed the stage to receive his diploma, all 4 of us, David and I, Elena and Carlos, stood and applauded. For Michael, we did the same. It wasn't perfect, wasn't how anyone would have chosen things to be, but it was a start. At the small reception afterward, a teacher who didn't know our situation commented on how much Michael looked like David. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," she said cheerfully. Carlos overheard and stiffened. David, after an awkward pause, simply said, "He's a remarkable young man," and moved on. Later, as the reception wound down, Ethan pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about what happens next, with college and everything." My heart clenched. What was coming? A declaration that he wanted to live with the Ramirezes? That he didn't want us in his life anymore? "I still want to go to MIT, he said. "That hasn't changed. But I was thinking maybe Michael could come visit sometimes. And maybe I could get to know his sisters. My sisters, biologically speaking." "Of course," I said, relief flooding through me. "Anything you want." "And the Ramirezes," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "They seem like good people. I'm not ready to call them mom and dad or anything, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's room for them somehow." I hugged him tightly. This child who wasn't mine by birth but was absolutely mine in every way that mattered. "There's room," I assured him. "We'll figure it out together." 1 year later, we've established a new normal. Not perfect, not what anyone would have chosen, but workable. Ethan is thriving at MIT, coming home for breaks to our apartment, but occasionally spending weekends with the Ramirezes. Michael visits us sometimes too, curious about the life he might have had, about his biological roots. The 4 of us parents have developed a cautious friendship. Elena and I meet for coffee every few weeks. She tells me stories about Michael's childhood, and I share Ethan's. It's bittersweet, these glimpses of what we missed, but there's healing in it too. Last Christmas, we attempted a joint celebration. It was awkward at times, but also warm in unexpected ways. Michael's sisters have embraced having 2 bonus brothers, as they call them. They draw elaborate family trees that make sense only to children, with dotted lines and solid lines connecting us all. The hospital settlement provided both families with financial compensation, though no amount could truly address what happened. The Ramirezes used some of their portion to start college funds for their daughters. We've established a scholarship for students interested in medical ethics. Ethan still struggles sometimes with questions of identity. Who would I have been if I'd grown up as Michael Ramirez in Queens? He asked me during his last visit home, would I still be me? I don't have an answer for him. None of us do. We only know that 18 years of loving and raising a child creates a bond that no DNA test can sever. The hospital made a terrible mistake. but the love that grew from it was never a mistake. Family is biology, yes, but it's also 18 years of bedtime stories, of bandaged knees and science projects, of shared jokes and holiday traditions. It's who shows up, day after day. It's who knows that you hate cilantro and love old sci-fi movies and sleep with the window cracked even in winter. I have a photo on my desk now. It was taken at Thanksgiving. Ethan and Michael stand shoulder to shoulder, different in appearance but similar in their tentative smiles. Behind them stand 4 parents, connected by an error, but choosing to move forward together. It's not the family portrait I ever imagined, but it's ours. 18 years of love don't disappear with a DNA test. Biology gave you life, but I gave you 18 years. We raised the wrong child, but he's still our child. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who love you enough to redefine what family means. What would you do? Keep the child you raised or reclaim your biological child? Leave your comment below. Subscribe for more emotional stories. Share if you believe love matters more than DNA.